My name is Liz, and I am in love with Jesus. When I was in early elementary school, I was hanging out with people who were in 5th grade learning sex ed and all the language and profanities that come with being 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. And so that made me grow up very quickly. Went through the end of my elementary school learning everything that my junior high friends were going through, which is a kind of rough period in time anyways. I'd gone to Awana for a few years and stopped when I was in 5th grade and had no interest. My parents, they were always partying, and they would drink and get drunk and dance and stuff, and we would play in the other room and hang out. And I wasn't thinking like, God, I don't care about you. I just didn't care. I didn't have a thought in the world about him as I went day to day. I was very angry at my mom for a very long time, and I remember I was upset again, crying in my room this time, and she walked by and looked at me and goes, "Why are you crying?" Like it was like the stupidest thing in the world for me to be crying for any reason. And I looked at her and I yelled at her, "Because you don't love me." And she looked at me and I could see her heart sank when I said it. And she dropped down to her knees next to me and looked at me with tears in her eyes, starting to cry, and said, "Why would you think that?" And I looked at her and said with like the meanest tone I could conjure up, "Because you don't." And she looked at me and said, "Do you really believe that?" And I said, "Yeah." And she got up and walked out of my room, and I heard her crying in the living room for hours afterwards. And part of me was glad that I had hurt her being 16, because finally she was understanding some of the hurt that she had given me after feeling rejected for years because she was choosing alcohol or weed over me. I was a mean, mean girl, purposely malicious almost. When I was 14, my brother asked me to go to campus life. I was resistant, but had been bored all afternoon, and so I said, anything's got to be better than sitting at home, and I went with my brother in his gray beater station wagon from 1995 or whatever it was, and had some conflict resolution time with some leaders, and came on and said, okay, I'll give it a go for a while, and became a student leader for my junior year. So it's a very fond memory of mine, senior send-off, when like half of the room was crying when they had to think of me going, and I was like, wow, when did this happen? When did this like mean 14-year-old girl become this girl that is becoming a woman that people look up to, and who they say, you've impacted me? And I say, how? And they say, you have. And that's crazy. He took me from being a mean kid who had the vocabulary of a sailor to having a heart for kids. And that's been really crazy, is seeing the way that he's changed me and used people in my lives to take me from this person who hated everybody around me who I ever came in contact with, to somebody who tries not to cuss and tries to be a good example in speech and in activity, to try to live above reproach, to try to be these things, but it's things that I can't do without God. And he's made me dependent on him, and he's given me good friends who have taught me how it is to be a good friend. And one of the things that Youth for Christ did was it taught me how to love other kids, learning how to love people like Christ, because that's completely different than the way that I'd ever loved anybody before I came to Christ. I've learned how to love like Jesus. That's what changed my life. Being shown God's love by adults who didn't need to care about me is what showed me Christ's love. Was these people who had no clue who I was, wanted to know who I was, at the same time didn't care who I was, because they didn't care what I had done. They cared what I had been through, they cared what hurts I had, what scars I had, but they loved me regardless. Their job was to love me. And they did it well, and I thank God for that I felt him through Youth for Christ. And now this is my mission. This is my life. This is what I love, and this is my story.